Back in 2003, the concept of a professional fighting game player was still just a pipe dream. But there was one player who was already the closest thing fighting games had to a superstar: Daigo Umehara. Before Moment 37, before he had ever won or even attended an EVO, hype was already building for the man we now know as the Beast. And then, one weekend in the summer of 2003, Daigo attended the tournament that would truly set his career in motion. Today, join us for a look into the early history of Daigo Umehara, the reputation he built up before attending his first EVO in 2003, and the legendary beginning to his international career more than 2 decades ago in California. Daigo had been over to America just once, but it had been 5 years prior, back in 1998. Back then, he was a 17-year-old challenging America's best Street Fighter Alpha 3 players in the first ever international Street Fighter event sponsored by Capcom. Daigo represented Japan against America's Alex Valle, and he was able to win in a tightly contested 2-1 set to both claim the title of Best in the World and become one of the biggest rising stars in fighting games. His accomplishment reached beyond the fighting game world back in Japan too, as his win was showcased in a nearly hour-long television report that aired across the country. Daigo, who was still just a teenager back then, had to deal with things like school that got in the way of immediately becoming a full-time fighting gamer. But in 2003, he started popping up at major tournaments again, and it was like he never left. His runs at Super Battle Opera 2003 really got American fighting game nerds speculating about a potential return to America for EVO. Super Battle Opera would go on to become Japan's biggest fighting game tournament for the next decade, and at the first one in 2003, Daigo took home the crown in the Super Street Fighter II Turbo 3v3 competition with his teammates Odachun and Kurahashi. He also had an incredible run in one of the solo events, finishing second in Capcom vs SNK 2, stopped by the one and only Tokido. He even added a 3rd place finish in another team event for Guilty Gear XX. The Shoryuken forums, often abbreviated to SRK, were basically the hub for fighting game discussion in the pre-social media internet. It was a place to both talk about the big-time fighting games of the day like Street Fighter III Third Strike, Capcom vs SNK 2, and Guilty Gear XX, as well as connect with the growing competitive scene. In the lead up to EVO 2003, a lot of people wondered which Japanese players might be coming across the pond to square up against American players. EVO was only in its 2nd year as the Evolution Championship Series after the rebrand from the original name of Battle by the Bay, but it was quickly growing and had already established itself as the tournament of the year for American and international fighting game players alike. Many remembered Daigo's performance from the Street Fighter Alpha 3 championships, and his return with such strong runs at Super Battle Opera had American fighting game fans clamoring to see how he'd fare stateside. How would America's best stand up to him? Could Umehara really be the best fighting game player in the world? It may have been 23 years ago, but even back then, this was the kind of performance that had content creators frothing. Well, the closest you could get to content creator in the pre-YouTube days anyway. Seth Killian, one of the FGC's most legendary commentators and analysts, compiled a long post on Daigo as part of his Domination 101 series on the SRK forums, where he took a deep look at just what made Daigo so good in so many games. Killian's post is also one of the first places where the Beast nickname, which Daigo is already rocking in Japan, showed up in the American fighting game conversation. A lot of the forum posts were still pessimistic on the idea that Daigo would actually show up. Some figured he was going to commit himself to college, and others claimed to have personal conversations with Daigo about EVO 2003 that suggested he'd be staying home. But thankfully for fighting game history, and unfortunately for everybody trying to win that year, Daigo got on that plane and made his way to California Polytechnical Institute for the biggest fighting game tournament of the year. The strongest hype around Daigo wasn't in either of the Street Fighter games he entered, but rather Capcom vs SNK 2. Despite getting dispatched from the winner's bracket early in the game's debut at EVO 2002, Tokido took home the trophy behind an insanely strong loser's run. The CVS2 tournament at SBO was single elimination and best of 1. But that one game Daigo played against Tokido in Grand Finals was competitive until Tokido's Sakura ran away with things against Daigo's Anchor Sagat to finish the tourney. Still, anybody capable of keeping up with Tokido had the potential to win EVO 2003's CVS2 bracket, especially when it became clear that Tokido himself wouldn't be making the trip to try and repeat. Daigo delivered a strong run at EVO, making it all the way to winners finals thanks to a win over CVS2 legend Boss. But he couldn't get through Ino, a fellow Japanese player using Blanca, Cammy, and Sagat. Daigo shared the final 2 characters with Ino, but ran Guile in his lead slot, the character's only appearance in the top 8 bracket. He made it back to Grand Finals thanks to a win over Mago, and even managed a dominant 2-0 victory over Ino to set up a winner-takes-all bracket reset. However, Ino managed to stymie Daigo's momentum and win 2-1 to take the tournament. Daigo finished second place in another bracket at EVO 2003. Of the 4 brackets he entered, the expectations for Daigo were probably lowest in Street Fighter III Third Strike. But there he was, up on the final stage once again, despite falling out of losers prior to top 8. He had to beat Nuki, Ricky Ortiz, Ino, and KSK to lock in a grand final spot. He would finally fall to KO, the man who would also take him out the next year in 2004, following Daigo's legendary parry against Justin Wong. 2 second places at his first EVO and his first trip to America since the Alpha 3 championships? That's a pretty solid weekend. But let's be real, we wouldn't be making this video if Daigo was the Mr. Second Place of EVO 2003. Daigo is far from a one-trick pony when it comes to his character choices, but he's by far best known for his Shoto play. He won the Alpha 3 championships with Akuma and used Ken to reach second place in his first EVO Third Strike bracket. In Super Turbo, Daigo was a dedicated Ryu player, and his Ryu absolutely dominated the EVO 2003 Super Turbo bracket. Daigo rolled through winners bracket on his way to top 8, and his first test there would be America's top Dhalsim player, Jason Cole. It's easy for a Ryu player to get baited into forcing a rushdown game against Dhalsim and his fireball zoning, but Daigo didn't fall for it. Jason would hit him with a few Yoga Flames, but instead of panicking, Daigo simply collected data and waited for his chances to break the zone. When Jason noticed Daigo was happy to back off and tried to get aggressive himself, Daigo was ready, finding favorable trades against Dhalsim's jump-ins and having to answer for his drill kick on deck as well. In the final round of the set, Jason nearly made a comeback from a massive life deficit, finally breaking Daigo's defense and pelting him with drill kicks to close the life gap. But here, Daigo showed his clutch G, hitting a cross-up to open Jason up and finishing the set with an impressive conversion into Red Fireball. Daigo's next opponent was Nuki, a player he already had a history against. See, Daigo earned his way into that Street Fighter Alpha 3 World Championship match against Alex Valle by taking out Nuki in Japan's national final, and he was one of the victims of Daigo's losers run in Third Strike. Nuki played Chun-Li, and unsurprisingly, the pace of this match was much faster than the match against Jason's Dhalsim. In the first round, Nuki brought Daigo to the corner after reading 2 fireballs, keeping him locked down. Nuki would bring Daigo down to just a pixel of health, and a grab would steal the first round. If you blinked, you missed the second round. Daigo played immaculate footsies and took a one-sided victory. He carried that momentum through to the final round, and after a brief exchange of fireballs at full screen, Daigo closed the space and baited a DP from Nuki, ending the punish sequence with a sick conversion at the wall. Nuki would put up a more convincing fight in the second game though, just barely taking it to force a decisive third game. But Daigo's patience and technical prowess would ultimately grant him a dominant victory. It was a total display of Daigo's skill as he showed acute awareness of Nuki's habits, while also executing high-level tech like Kara canceling into a super to nullify Chun-Li's fireball. Nuki managed to earn his way back to Daigo with the win in Losers Finals, and he started strong with a clean first round to start Grand Finals. That would be the last round Nuki would win in the rest of the tournament. Daigo dominated the rest of Grand Finals, showing different aspects of what already made him one of the best fighting game players in the world throughout the set. He won round 2 of game 1 by locking Nuki in the corner, spacing his fireballs perfectly, and eventually forcing a mistake through the constant pressure. In game 2, the few times he was opened up by Nuki, Daigo was able to break Nuki's overzealous offense with Shoryukens and prevent the round from snowballing. In Game 3, with Nuki on the defensive, Daigo dialed up the aggression, hitting unexpected jump-ins and even setting a gutsy but genius trap. He intentionally whiffed a Shoryuken from a range where he could frame trap any of Nuki's attempts to swing and turn what looked like a mistake into more offense and a ton of mental damage. The final round was a fitting end to one of the most dominant fighting game runs anybody had ever seen. Daigo lost just one singular game throughout this entire tournament and picked up the first of his 4 EVO championships in the Street Fighter series. But Daigo isn't just a Street Fighter player. He entered one more bracket at EVO 2003, Guilty Gear XX. Daigo has plenty of experience with other fighting game franchises. Some of his earliest exploits came in Vampire Hunter, a game in which he once logged a 200-plus game win streak that only ended when they had to close the arcade. Although he would eventually dedicate himself solely to Street Fighter, at least competitively, Daigo's brief time with Guilty Gear left its mark on the scene nonetheless. Guilty Gear XX, or Guilty Gear X2, released for Japanese PS2 audiences in late 2002 and early 2003 in North America. The Guilty Gear competitive scene was dominated by Japan and Southeast Asia, thanks to the more extensive proliferation of Guilty Gear arcade cabinets in those countries. Japan in particular already had a dedicated arcade scene, and according to SRK forum archives, there was an exhibition held between Japanese and US players before the official tournament at EVO 2003. Japan apparently destroyed the American players in these games, according to the forum posts, and Daigo in particular was especially impressive, running people over with his sole bad guy. And just like in Super Turbo, Daigo made it to top 8 on winner's side, where he ran into an American Johnny player, David Hem. David was about to learn just how aggressive Daigo's soul could get. He ripped Volcanic Viper seemingly every chance he could, mixing in Roman cancels, wild throws, and air throws to keep David guessing. He used his meter liberally, going for combo extensions wherever possible. Every time David would try to take a turn, Daigo was ready to blow him up for it. And the poor Johnny player was swiftly dispatched by a 2-0 count. Next up was a soul mirror match against Daigo's countryman, Miyu. It was immediately clear that Miyu was willing to play as recklessly as Daigo, and the result was an explosive Game 1 that came down to the final round, with Miyu coming out on top after dancing around Daigo's fireball pressure. Daigo recognized the pace was getting out of hand and dialed it back a bit in Game 2, and he was handsomely rewarded. Miyu tried to finish his block strings with Volcanic Viper, expecting Daigo to maintain his aggression and try to swing. But Daigo stayed patient and blocked them out, giving him huge punish opportunities that allowed him to take Game 2. The set would go to a high-octane final game, final round. Both players were incredibly active, finishing with gunflame and threatening cancels, and throwing out Riot Stamp like their lives depended on it. Eventually, it came down to the final touch, and in the chaos, Daigo found one final far slash to punch his ticket to Grand Finals. Miyu scratched and clawed his way back to Grands, but Daigo was ready and waiting to stop any momentum Miyu had built in his win over yet another Japanese Soul player, id. Daigo once again changed things up, staggering his pressure more and mixing in more low pokes with 2D. And then, he hit the combo heard round the Guilty Gear world. Maybe the most anime of all anime combos, the Dust Loop. To be clear, there is still some debate as to who discovered or created the Dust Loop combo, but there's no doubt that Daigo was the first to hit it on this big of a stage and in such a meaningful game as Grand Finals at EVO. If you really knew where to look, you could find videos of Japanese players, Daigo included, hitting this combo. But it took until 2006 for it to hit YouTube and really take off. For a lot of Guilty Gear players, Daigo was showing them something new. Daigo kept on varying his pressure, both his button choices and his timings, and he kept getting Miyu to the wall. He hit the Dust Loop again in Game 2, and pretty soon he was up 2-0. Daigo clinched the first round of Game 3 with a super, but Miyu clawed his way back with a huge dust combo of his own to bring it to a final round. Miyu took a lead and had a big opportunity to open it up after hitting Daigo with a counter hit Riot Stamp, but he dropped it. and Daigo was ready to take advantage. He backdashed to create some space. It got clipped, but he was left with just enough health to allow one last-ditch attempt to work his way back into the round with a riot stamp of his own. And with that, Street Fighter legend Daigo Umehara became Guilty Gear's first EVO champion, taking the title behind a convincing final bracket performance where he dropped just a single game. Even with all the hype surrounding Daigo as he entered his first EVO, he met and even surpassed the expectations. 2 EVO wins and 2 second-place finishes would make for a great career, and he accomplished it all in a single weekend. For Daigo, though, it was just the beginning. He would repeat in 2004, winning Super Turbo and Guilty Gear X2 yet again, and also becoming immortalized through Moment 37 in yet another second-place finish in Third Strike. After that, nobody could doubt that Daigo would be on top of the fighting game world for years to come. He dedicated himself solely to the Street Fighter series as a competitor after 2004, despite his success in Guilty Gear XX, a fruitful decision that helped bring in 2 more EVO titles and many other victories over the decades. But 11 years later, he played an exhibition match with legendary Japanese player Ogawa in Guilty Gear Exard Sign, a game that Daigo never competed in at a major level. Everybody assumed that it would be a wash for Ogawa, but Daigo won the first 2 games of the set before Ogawa was barely able to sweat out the reverse 3-0. Just in case you would question Ogawa's skill level, he went on to win the Exard bracket at EVO that year. That's just how good the beast is. 23 years ago, he came to Pomona, California and proved it to the whole world with what remains one of the most impressive fighting game weekends of all time. And Daigo himself is responsible for some of the biggest competition. This was the weekend that vaulted him into fighting game superstardom. After all was said and done, it wasn't just the SRK forum heads who knew of Daigo Umehara. He made sure that nobody who saw him that weekend was ever going to forget his name. Thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe to the channel for more fighting game history videos, and if you want to see more of Daigo the Beast, check out the video right there on your screen.